At 0520 hours on August 13, 1941, Senior Sergeant Lyudmila Pavlichenko pressed her cheek against the wooden stock of her Mosin Nagant rifle and watched a Romanian officer emerge from a trench line approximately 400 meters across no man's land near Belyevka, outside Odessa, Ukraine. The officer carried binoculars and a map case, high-value target. He was studying Soviet defensive positions, likely preparing coordinates for an artillery strike that would devastate the 25th Chapayev Division's lines. Standard doctrine said, one shot, immediate relocation. Miss, and you reveal your position. Hit, and enemy counter-snipers will hunt you for the rest of the day. Lyudmila was 24 years old, a history student from Kiev University. 2 months earlier, she'd been studying for her doctoral exams. Now she was lying in a shell crater, rifle trained on an enemy officer, about to make a decision that would define the rest of her life. She'd already made 37 confirmed shots in the past 6 weeks. 37 enemy soldiers who would never return home. Each one weighed on her conscience, but she'd learned to compartmentalize. This was survival. This was defending her homeland. The officer raised his binoculars, began scanning the Soviet positions, looking directly at where Lyudmila's battalion was concentrated. In 8 seconds, Lyudmila would pull the trigger, the officer would fall, and she would become the target of every German and Romanian sniper within 5 kilometers. This is the story of how a university student became the most effective female combat soldier in recorded history, how she accumulated 309 confirmed results over 256 days of continuous combat, how she survived wounds that should have ended her career, and how she became the first Soviet citizen received by a U.S. president touring America while Nazi forces pushed deeper into her homeland. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko was born July 12, 1916, in Bila Tserkva, a small town south of Kiev in what was then the Russian Empire, soon to become the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Her father worked in a factory. Her mother was a teacher. Working-class family. Education valued. Expectations set high. By age 14, Lyudmila's family moved to Kiev. She attended a technical school, then enrolled in Kiev University to study history. Her focus? Ancient civilizations, specifically the Mongol invasions of Eastern Europe. She wanted to become a historian, possibly a professor. But Lyudmila had another interest that seemed contradictory for a young intellectual woman in the 1930s, shooting. In 1932, at age 16, Lyudmila joined a local Osoavyahim shooting club. Osoavyahim was a Soviet civil defense organization that provided paramilitary training to civilians, including marksmanship. She started on small-bore rifles, .22 caliber target shooting, indoor ranges, paper targets at 25 and 50 meters. She was naturally talented, steady hands, excellent eyesight, patience to control breathing and timing. Within 6 months, she'd earned marksman classification. By 1937, she'd advanced to full-bore military rifles, the Mosin Nagant M91-30, the standard Soviet infantry rifle chambered in 7.62 by 54 millimeters R. Specifications: action, bolt action, 5-round internal magazine, barrel length 29 inches, overall weight 8.8 pounds, effective range 500 plus meters with iron sights, 800 with telescopic, muzzle velocity approximately 2,600 feet per second. Lyudmila qualified as a sniper through Osoavyahim in 1937. This was recreational training, not military service. She remained a university student, but she'd learned skills that would later define her life. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. 3 million Axis soldiers crossed the border, the largest military invasion in history. Kiev, where Lyudmila was completing her master's degree, was directly in the path of Army Group South. The Wehrmacht's objective: seize Ukraine's industrial resources and agricultural production, then push toward the Caucasus oil field. Within days, the Red Army was in retreat. Casualties were catastrophic, equipment losses staggering. The Soviet Union needed every able body who could hold a rifle. Lyudmila volunteered for military service on June 25, 1941, 3 days after the invasion began. When Lyudmila arrived at the recruitment office, she carried documentation proving her sniper qualification. Through Evacuation, she requested assignment as a sniper. The recruitment officer looked at her documentation, looked at Lyudmila, 24 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, approximately 135 pounds, female. "Comrade," the officer said, "we need nurses, medics, not snipers." Lyudmila insisted. She had the qualification. She could shoot. She wanted to fight, not provide medical support. The officer was skeptical, but couldn't ignore her documentation. He sent her to the 25th Chapayev Rifle Division for evaluation. At the division's rifle range, Lyudmila was tested. The evaluation officer handed her a Mosin Nagant M9130 with PU scope and pointed to targets at 300, 400, and 500 meters. "Show us," he said. Lyudmila took position, adjusted the scope, controlled her breathing, fired 3 shots at the 300-meter target, 3 center mass hits. She engaged the 400-meter target, 2 shots, 2 hits. Finally, the 500-meter target, 1 shot, hit. The evaluation officer nodded. "You're assigned as a sniper with the 54th Regiment. Report tomorrow." The 25th Chapayev Division deployed to defend Odessa, the major Black Sea port in southern Ukraine. The city was strategically vital. If Odessa fell, Romanian and German forces would control the entire Black Sea coast and threaten Soviet naval operations. The defense of Odessa began August 5, 1941. The siege would last 73 days, some of the most intense urban combat of the early war. Lyudmila arrived August 8th. She was assigned to a rifle company providing defensive positions along the city's perimeter. Her equipment: Mosin Nagant M9130 with PU 3.5x telescopic sight, 300 rounds of 7.62 by 54R ammunition, standard Red Army uniform, gymnastiorka tunic, charivari trousers, pilotka side cap, entrenching tool, canteen, bread bag with rations. No specialized camouflage or sniper-specific equipment. She was given one instruction: engage high-value targets. Officers, machine gunners, observers, make every round count. Ammunition is limited. Lyudmila's first combat engagement occurred August 10th, 1941, 2 days after arriving in Odessa. She'd established a position in the rubble of a destroyed warehouse overlooking Romanian approach routes. The enemy was probing Soviet defenses, testing for weak points. At approximately 15:30 hours, she observed 2 Romanian soldiers moving through a communications trench at approximately 350 meters. They were carrying wire spools, communications specialists, valuable targets. Lyudmila aimed at the lead soldier. The PU scope's reticle was simple: a heavy crosshair with range estimation marks. She placed the crosshair center mass, accounted for slight wind from left to right, squeezed the trigger slowly. The rifle cracked. The soldier fell. The second soldier reacted instantly, dropped flat, began crawling back toward cover. Lyudmila worked the bolt. The Mosin Nagant's action was smooth, but required firm manipulation. She chambered a fresh round, found the crawling soldier in her scope, led him slightly, fired, hit. 2 shots, 2 results. Lyudmila's combat record had begun. That night, back in her unit's defensive position, Lyudmila sat alone. She just ended 2 lives. 2 men who had families, who had hopes,
who had never returned home. She later wrote in her memoir, "I did not feel triumph. I felt the weight of necessity. These men were invading my country. They would take positions I neutralized, or they would contribute to attacks that would cost Soviet lives. This was mathematics, terrible mathematics, but mathematics nonetheless." This rationalization would sustain her through 256 days of combat. Not hatred, not bloodlust, cold calculation that her actions saved more lives than they took. The first 2 weeks in Odessa taught Lyudmila the difference between range shooting and combat. On the range, targets were stationary, conditions controlled, no one shot back. In combat, everything was chaos. Enemy artillery randomly impacted positions. Machine gun fire forced her to stay low for hours. Romanian and German snipers hunted Soviet positions. Lyudmila learned quickly. Lessons written in survival. Lesson 1. Never fire from the same position twice. After engaging a target, relocate immediately. Enemy observers would call mortar fire on your last known position within minutes. Lesson 2. Patience beats speed. Better to wait 6 hours for the perfect shot than take a rushed attempt that reveals your position and achieves nothing. Lesson 3. Study patterns. Enemy troops followed routines. Supply runs at dawn, officer briefings at midday, shift changes at evening. Recognize the pattern, exploit it.
This brings us back to the engagement described in The Hook. August 13th, 05:20 hours. The Romanian officer with binoculars and map case. Lyudmila had been in position since 03:30, 2 hours of waiting, cramped muscles, eyes straining through the scope, dawn mist beginning to lift. The officer emerged from the trench, tall man, confident posture. He raised his binoculars and began scanning Soviet positions methodically. Lyudmila estimated range, 400 meters. Difficult shot but manageable. Wind was minimal. Early morning air, relatively stable. The challenge: the officer was exposed for perhaps 30 seconds before he would return to cover. 1. Opportunity. Lyudmila's thought process. If I miss, he returns to cover, reports what he observed, and Soviet artillery faces counter-battery fire within an hour. If I take the shot and hit, Romanian forces lose intelligence. The artillery strike doesn't happen. How many Soviet soldiers survive because this man doesn't complete his reconnaissance? Decision made. She adjusted her aim, placed the crosshair on the officer's chest, controlled her breathing. Slow exhale, natural pause, squeeze. The Mosin Nagin barked. Through the scope, Lyudmila saw the officer stagger, fall backward into the trench. Hit. Lyudmila worked the bolt, ejected the casing, chambered a fresh round, scanned for additional targets. 3 seconds later, Romanian rifle fire began impacting near her position. They'd spotted the muzzle flash or dust kicked up by the shot. Not precise fire, but close enough to be dangerous. Lyudmila stayed low, counted to 30, then crawled backward out of the position, 20 meters to a pre-planned secondary location. She'd scouted it the previous evening specifically for situations like this. From the secondary position, she observed Romanian soldiers emerged from trenches, moving toward where she'd fired from, exactly as predicted. She engaged 2 more targets over the next hour, both confirmed hits, both soldiers attempting to locate her primary position. By 8 a.m. hours, Lyudmila withdrew completely. 3 confirmed results, 0 friendly casualties in her sector. Successful operation. On August 28th, Lyudmila faced her first counter-sniper engagement. She'd been operating in the same sector for 3 weeks, accumulated 18 confirmed results. Enemy commanders noticed the pattern. They brought in a specialist. At 11:45 hours, Lyudmila was observing enemy positions from a partially collapsed building. Good concealment, clear fields of fire. She'd been scanning for targets when a bullet impacted the wall 6 inches from her head. Brick fragments exploded. One piece cut her cheek. Not serious, but close. Too close. Enemy sniper. He'd spotted her position, fired first. Lyudmila rolled left, moved behind heavier cover. Her heart was pounding. That shot could have ended everything. She forced herself to think tactically. The enemy sniper had fired from where? She replayed the moment, the sound, the angle of impact. There. A destroyed church tower, approximately 550 meters northwest. Perfect sniper position. High ground,
multiple firing lanes. But now Lyudmila knew his location. The enemy sniper had revealed himself by taking the first shot. She relocated to a different window, one that provided an angle on the church tower. Settled in, waited. 30 minutes passed. 40. An hour. Lyudmila didn't move, barely breathed, just watched through her scope. At 13:20 hours, she saw movement. Brief, just the scope glinting in sunlight, the enemy sniper adjusting position. Lyudmila aimed at the spot, held, waited. The enemy sniper appeared again, for perhaps 2 seconds, scanning Soviet positions through his optic. Fatal mistake. Lyudmila fired. The distance was extreme, 550 meters, beyond the Mosin Nagant's optimal range, but she had accounted for bullet drop, wind, everything. Through her scope, she saw the enemy sniper's rifle fall forward, disappear from view. Confirmed result. Enemy sniper neutralized. Lyudmila immediately relocated. Standard procedure. Even successful shots required immediate displacement. Later that day, a reconnaissance patrol confirmed the result. German sniper found in the church tower, single shot through the upper chest. He'd been carrying a Mauser Kar-9 8K with Zeiss ZF-41 scope, professional equipment, professional operator. Lyudmila had defeated him through patience and discipline. By September, the siege of Odessa had intensified. Romanian Fourth Army, reinforced by German forces, was pushing harder. Soviet defenders were exhausted, ammunition running low, casualties mounting. Lyudmila had accumulated 43 confirmed results by the end of August. The unit commanders knew her record. They began assigning her to the most dangerous sectors. September 7th, Lyudmila engaged a Romanian machine gun crew at 420 meters, 3 targets, neutralized. The machine gun had been pinning down a Soviet infantry platoon for 6 hours. Her intervention allowed the platoon to withdraw with minimal casualties. September 14th, German forces launched a major assault on the northern perimeter. Lyudmila provided overwatch for defending Soviet troops. She engaged 15 targets over 8 hours of continuous combat. 12 confirmed results. She fired 87 rounds. Accuracy rate, approximately 14%. That percentage seems low by peacetime standards, but in sustained combat, with targets moving, artillery impacting nearby, exhaustion setting in, 14% was exceptional. By mid-September, Lyudmila had been in continuous combat for 6 weeks. The physical and psychological toll was severe. Weight loss, she had dropped from 135 pounds to approximately 118 pounds. Rations were limited. Stress burned calories faster than food could replace them. Sleep deprivation. 4 hours of sleep per night maximum, often less. Often interrupted by artillery or alerts. Sensory damage. Hours behind the scope caused eye strain. Constant rifle fire without proper hearing protection left her ears ringing continuously. Psychological strain. By September 15th, Lyudmila had 67 confirmed results. 67 human beings whose lives she had ended. She stopped counting after 70. The numbers became abstract, a defensive mechanism. On October 1st, 1941, Soviet High Command ordered the evacuation of Odessa. The city couldn't be held. Romanian forces had surrounded it. German reinforcements were arriving. Better to preserve the defending troops for other battles. The evacuation lasted 15 days. Soviet ships extracted the garrison under fire. Chaotic, desperate, casualties were heavy. Lyudmila evacuated on October 14th. She defended Odessa for 73 days, accumulated 187 confirmed results, the highest total for any Soviet sniper in that campaign. She was promoted to senior sergeant and transferred to the 25th Chapayev Division's new deployment, Sevastopol, Crimea. Sevastopol was the Soviet Union's primary Black Sea naval base, strategically critical, heavily fortified. The Germans wanted it. They would lay siege for 250 days. Lyudmila arrived in Sevastopol on October 20th, 1941. The siege had just begun. German and Romanian forces were establishing positions. Artillery was finding range. The long fight was starting. Her assignment? Provide counter-sniper operations and eliminate high-value targets throughout the defensive perimeter. The terrain was different from Odessa. Sevastopol had more hills, more rocky ground, more vegetation. This provided better concealment, but also made movement harder. Throughout November, Lyudmila engaged in numerous counter-sniper operations. German command had brought in their best shooters specifically to hunt Soviet snipers. They knew names, they knew records, they wanted results. November 9th, Lyudmila faced a German sniper who'd been operating in her sector for 3 days. He'd neutralized 4 Soviet snipers already. Professional, patient, dangerous. The engagement lasted 2 days. Not continuous. Both snipers would establish position, observe, wait for the other to make a mistake, then withdraw when no opportunity appeared. On the second day, November 10th, at approximately 14:20 hours, the German sniper made his error. He fired at a decoy target, a helmet on a stick, classic technique, and Lyudmila caught the muzzle flash. She returned fire immediately. Distance, approximately 480 meters. The German sniper was partially concealed behind rocks. Not a perfect shot, but good enough. Through her scope, Lyudmila saw him fall back, stop moving. Soviet reconnaissance confirmed the result later. German sniper, Obergefreiter, with 3 years of experience on the Eastern Front. He'd accumulated 34 confirmed results before Lyudmila ended his war.
Winter on the Crimean Peninsula was brutal. Temperatures dropped below freezing. Snow and ice made movement treacherous. Equipment malfunctioned in the cold. The Mosin Nagant, designed for Russian winters, performed better than German rifles. Bolt action remained functional, but Lyudmila still had to clean her rifle multiple times daily to prevent ice buildup. December 19, 1941, Lyudmila engaged targets during a German assault on Soviet positions. She fired 52 rounds over 6 hours, 7 confirmed results, all German infantry attempting to overrun defensive lines. One engagement was particularly close. A German soldier reached within 150 meters of her position before she neutralized him. After the battle, she examined his equipment. He'd been carrying photographs, family, children, wife. That night, Lyudmila wrote in her journal, "I don't allow myself to think about their families. I can't. If I think of them as fathers, sons, brothers, I won't be able to function. They are targets, numbers, threats. This is how I survive psychologically." In February 1942, Lyudmila began training other female snipers. Soviet command had recognized that women could be highly effective in this role. They'd started recruiting more female snipers. Lyudmila trained 12 women over 3 weeks. She taught them everything she'd learned: camouflage, patience, wind reading, range estimation, tactical thinking. Most importantly, she taught them psychological discipline. "You will question whether you can do this," she told them. "You will feel guilt. This is normal. This is human, but you must compartmentalize. Focus on the technical aspects, the mechanics, the mission. Process the emotions later when you're safe." 8 of those 12 women survived the war. 2 became snipers with over 100 confirmed results each. They credited Lyudmila's training for their effectiveness. March and April 1942 represented Lyudmila's most intense operational period. German forces launched repeated assaults on Sevastopol. Soviet defenders fought desperately to hold positions. March 12th, Lyudmila engaged 11 targets during a 9-hour battle. 8 confirmed results. She was providing overwatch for a Soviet counterattack. Her precision fire suppressed German machine gun positions, allowing Soviet infantry to advance. April 4th, German artillery spotters were directing fire onto Soviet defensive positions with devastating accuracy. Lyudmila was assigned to locate and neutralize them. She spent 11 hours in position, observing, waiting. At 16:40 hours, she spotted an artillery observer in a concealed position 510 meters distant. 1 shot, confirmed result. German artillery effectiveness in that sector dropped immediately. April 23rd, Lyudmila engaged 8 targets over 12 hours. 7 confirmed results. 1 miss, a shot at 620 meters in high wind conditions. The
The target escaped. Lyudmila documented the miss in her combat log. Professional accountability. On May 7, 1942, Lyudmila nearly became a casualty. She was observing German positions from a forward trench at approximately 0930 hours when artillery fire began impacting the Soviet lines. Not random harassing fire. Precise. Targeted. The Germans had been observing Soviet positions and called in a fire mission. Shells walked across the trench line, 105 millimeters. Heavy explosives. Lyudmila and 3 other soldiers were in the trench when a shell impacted 8 meters away. The blast wave threw Lyudmila against the trench wall. Concussive force. Temporary loss of consciousness. She woke seconds later. Ears bringing, vision blurred, taste of blood. She'd bitten her tongue. Her rifle was intact, still functional. Small miracle. The other 3 soldiers were casualties. 1 killed instantly. 2 wounded severely. Lyudmila had shrapnel wounds in her left arm and shoulder, minor. She could still function. She stayed in position, applied field dressing to her wounds, continued observing. Professional discipline. The mission continued. Later that day, she was ordered to medical treatment. The wounds weren't severe enough to remove her from combat. She returned to duty 3 days later.
On June 10, 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko's combat service ended. She was providing overwatch during a Soviet defensive operation. German mortar fire began impacting her sector. Standard harassment. She'd experienced it hundreds of times. At 13:52 hours, a mortar shell landed approximately 12 meters from her position. The blast threw shrapnel in all directions. Multiple fragments struck Lyudmila: face, arms, chest, legs. None individually fatal, but collectively serious. The most critical wound, shrapnel penetrated her face, causing severe damage to her left eye and surrounding tissue. Lyudmila was evacuated under fire. Medics stabilized her. She was conscious, but in severe pain. She'd lost significant blood. They transported her to a field hospital, then to an evacuation ship. She was taken to the Soviet mainland for surgery and recovery. The injury ended her combat effectiveness. She would partially recover vision in her left eye, but not enough for sniper operations. That level of work required perfect vision. She no longer had it. Her combat record at the time of her wounding: 309 confirmed results, 36 enemy snipers among them, 256 days of continuous combat operations. She was 25 years old. Lyudmila spent 3 months in hospitals, multiple surgeries to remove shrapnel and repair damage. She would carry metal fragments in her body for the rest of her life. During recovery, she received visitors, military officials, political officers. They had a proposal. The Soviet Union needed positive news. Morale was fragile. German forces had pushed deep into Soviet territory. Leningrad was under siege. Moscow had barely been saved. Stalingrad would soon become a desperate battle. Lyudmila's story: female sniper, 309 confirmed results, hero of the Soviet Union, was powerful propaganda. They wanted to use it.
On September 27, 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko arrived in Washington, D.C. She was the first Soviet citizen ever received by an American president. Franklin D. Roosevelt met her at the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, took personal interest in Lyudmila's story. They formed an unexpected friendship. The American media was fascinated. A female combat soldier, 309 confirmed results, young, intelligent, articulate, but also skeptical. American society in 1942 had rigid gender expectations. Women didn't serve in combat roles. Many journalists questioned whether Lyudmila's record was real or Soviet propaganda. Lyudmila toured American cities for 3 months: Washington, New York, Chicago, San Francisco. She gave speeches at rallies, universities, union halls. Her message was consistent. I am 25 years old. I have fought for my country for 256 days. I have seen friends die. I have experienced what war truly costs. While you debate whether women belong in combat, the Soviet Union is fighting for survival. We need your help. We need weapons, ammunition, supplies,
open a second front in Europe to relieve pressure on Soviet forces. Her speeches were effective, blunt, honest. She didn't romanticize war. She described it as horror that was necessary because the alternative, Nazi victory, was worse. The relationship between Lyudmila and Eleanor Roosevelt was significant. Eleanor invited Lyudmila to stay at the Roosevelt estate in Hyde Park, New York. They spent hours in conversation. Eleanor later wrote, "Lyudmila was remarkable, intelligent, thoughtful, carrying psychological scars from her experiences, but determined to use her story to help her country. She didn't present herself as a hero. She presented herself as a soldier who did her duty."
Lyudmila returned to the Soviet Union in January 1943. The tour had been successful. American public opinion shifted toward supporting increased aid. The Lend-Lease program expanded, but Lyudmila couldn't return to combat. Her injuries prevented it. Instead, she was assigned as a sniper instructor. For the remainder of the war, she trained Soviet snipers. She developed curriculum. She refined tactics. She passed on everything she'd learned through 256 days of combat. Hundreds of Soviet snipers received training influenced by Lyudmila's methods. Her knowledge, earned at tremendous personal cost, multiplied across the Red Army's sniper program. After the war ended in May 1945, Lyudmila returned to Kiev University. She completed her master's degree in history. She'd been working on it when the war interrupted her studies. She became a historian, taught at Soviet universities, published research on Soviet naval operations during World War II, lived quietly. She married twice. First marriage ended in divorce. Second marriage lasted until her husband's death in the 1970s. She had one son from her first marriage. Lyudmila rarely discussed her combat service publicly after the 1940s. She'd given her speeches, told her story, done her duty to history. Now she wanted privacy. When asked about her record, she would say, "I'm proud I defended my country. I'm glad I survived. I wish the war had never happened."
Lyudmila Pavlichenko received numerous awards during and after the war. Hero of the Soviet Union, highest Soviet military decoration, Order of Lenin, twice, Gold Star Medal, various campaign medals for Odessa and Sevastopol. She was also recognized internationally. The American press nicknamed her Lady Death. Ukrainian citizens considered her a national hero. Her record, 309 confirmed results, remains the highest for any female combat soldier in history. The closest comparison is Soviet sniper Rosa Shonina, with 59 confirmed results. Lyudmila's effectiveness demonstrated that combat capability isn't determined by gender. It's determined by training, discipline, intelligence, and will. Lyudmila continued working as a historian and researcher until her retirement in the 1970s. She published several academic papers and contributed to Soviet military history documentation. She maintained correspondence with Eleanor Roosevelt until Eleanor's death in 1962. When Eleanor passed, Lyudmila wrote, "I've lost one of the few people who understood that war makes soldiers of us all, regardless of gender. She treated me as an equal when many others saw me as a curiosity." In 1957, Eleanor Roosevelt visited the Soviet Union as part of a diplomatic tour. She insisted on meeting Lyudmila. They spent an afternoon together in Moscow, reminiscing about the 1942 American tour. Eleanor brought gifts, American books, photographs from their time together. Lyudmila gave Eleanor a medal she'd earned during the war, saying, "You fought for my country as much as I did. You deserve recognition." This friendship between a former First Lady and a former combat soldier symbolized that human connections can transcend politics and ideology. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died October 10, 1974, in Moscow at age 58. Cause of death? Stroke. She'd carried shrapnel in her body for 32 years. Medical complications from her wounds likely contributed to her death. She was buried with full military honors in WWII Cemetery in Moscow. Her grave marker is simple: her name, dates, and the Gold Star insignia, representing Hero of the Soviet Union status. Lyudmila's service influenced military doctrine in several ways. Soviet sniper program. Her techniques and training methods became standard curriculum. Post-war Soviet sniper doctrine incorporated lessons she documented. Female combat roles. She demonstrated that women could perform effectively in direct combat positions. This influenced Soviet policy allowing women in combat roles, though full implementation took decades. Psychological preparation. Lyudmila emphasized the psychological demands of sniper operation. Modern military training includes psychological preparation specifically because veterans like Lyudmila documented its importance. International recognition. Her 1942 American tour was one of the first instances of using individual military achievement for diplomatic purposes. This model influenced later public diplomacy efforts.
Today, Lyudmila Pavlichenko is remembered through multiple museums in Ukraine and Russia featuring her story. Several biographies published in Russian, Ukrainian, and English. A 2015 Russian biographical film, Battle for Sevastopol. Commemorative stamps issued by Ukraine Post. And annual memorial events in Odessa and Sevastopol on June 10th, day of her wounding. In 2018, the Ukrainian government issued a commemorative coin featuring Lyudmila's image, recognizing her as a national hero. In the United States, she's less well known, but military historians recognize her significance. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans includes her story in exhibits about Soviet participation in World War II. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's story transcends nationality and ideology. It's about human capacity, what people can accomplish under desperate circumstances when defending what they believe in. She didn't seek combat. She sought to defend her homeland. She applied her skills, developed recreationally before the war, to military necessity. She survived 256 days of continuous combat. She carried physical and psychological scars for the rest of her life. Her record stands not as glorification of violence, but as documentation of what war demands from those who fight it. She represents millions of Soviet soldiers, male and female, who fought against Nazi invasion. Many didn't survive, and those who did often lived quietly afterward, their stories untold. Lyudmila's story was told because she was exceptional, but she would say she represented all of them, ordinary people, forced by circumstances to do extraordinary things. If you found this historical account valuable, please like this video. It helps ensure that stories like Lyudmila's reach viewers interested in accurate military history. Subscribe for more detailed, factually grounded narratives about World War II and other historical military operations. Comment below. What aspect of Lyudmila's story do you find most significant? Her combat effectiveness? Her post-war diplomatic role? Her relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt? Let's discuss.